This book is exactly what I wanted. All this time that I've been anticipating Emily Wilde's map of the Otherlands. I'm so happy with Heather Fawcett. She did a fantastic job. This is book 2 in the Emily Wilde series. When I first read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, I was mostly interested in it because it looked so pretty and the name sounded interesting. And then when I read it, I fell in love with it. I love Emily as a character. That's mostly what I love about it. I find Emily to be very, very relatable. She might not be for everybody because not everybody is, not everyone has a mind like hers. Not everyone is as socially awkward as she is. Maybe if you're watching this video, you are. A lot of us bookish people tend to be. It had that same cozy feel. The relationship between her and Wendell was just sweet and nice. I would not call either of these books romance books. The romance element was part of it, but that was not the main thing. It wasn't the main draw. The only real complaints that I have about this one is that there's not an actual map. It's called the Map of the Otherlands. Shouldn't fantasy books have maps? It does take place in the real world, the equivalent to our world, but with fairies. They start at Cambridge and then go to the Austrian Alps, so it might be weird to request a map of the Austrian Alps in the early 1900s. But it would have been fun to have like a map of that area at the time that it was, overlaid with all the fairy doors that they discovered along the way. That would have been fun. But part of the point is that fairy doors aren't consistent. They don't necessarily stay put. They kind of move around. They try to trick mortals. She knew they would be hard to map. But just like Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies is her personal journal while she's writing her encyclopedia, it's the same thing with the Map of the Otherlands. This is her personal journal entries. Unlike the first one, mapping the Otherlands is not her main goal in this book. It's not why they go to the Alps. If you've read the first one, you know that Wendell is trying to get home. He is the rightful king of his realm. He's been deposed by his evil stepmother. He's trying to get back there. He's going to try to make things right. So that's the main reason that Emily and Wendell go. And then one of her co-workers comes along, someone who had originally accused her of lying on the papers she had wrote about her time in Ravenspeak. Because it was obviously too ridiculous to all be true. She was obviously lying until some fairies come in and try to attack Wendell, and he observes that whole situation. He decides he's going to the Alps too. Not to help Wendell, but for research purposes. And also with them goes Emily's niece. That was something I liked about this book. I liked all the relationships. Emily is very awkward with people. She doesn't know how to relate to people. She prefers to work alone. But her niece wants to be her assistant. Her niece admires her and wants to help her. And her niece is 19. I always say her name wrong. And I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. I looked up pronunciations, but Ariadne? Ariadne? I think her niece is pronounced Ariadne. Her niece comes along, and her niece is 19. She's an adult. She's attending Cambridge, but Emily, being 30, feels so much older than her niece. She kind of is looking at Ariadne like she's still a child. So much younger, so inexperienced compared to her, which I find interesting because in a lot of fantasy books, the main female lead is Ariadne's age, not Emily's age. And she's looking at Ariadne like she's so young. I'm probably guilty of that. I'm about to turn 37, so someone who's 19 does look pretty young to me. But I remember being 19. And a 19-year-old is still an adult and shouldn't be treated like a child. My other complaint, besides not having a map, is that sometimes I felt like the differences between Emily and Wendell were a little too on the nose, made maybe a little too obvious. Like Emily is your classic scholarly slob, and Wendell likes everything neat and clean, and they stress each other out. I don't have time for things like cleaning. What a waste of my time. And Wendell can't stand it. He must clean and tidy. I do plan on doing a character study on Emily and Wendell, so I'll go more into that in that video. That one will have spoilers. So if you read this and enjoy it, come back later for that one. I haven't filmed it yet. It'll be coming later. But things like that, like basic differences in your personality type, can cause clashes in a relationship. And I think that's something worth diving deeper into because it's applicable to real life and real people. And then the other reason that they go to the Alps is there's this thing called the Nexus. So a fairy door leads to somewhere in fairy, not necessarily equivalent to where it is in the real physical world. And then there's what's called the Nexus, which is a fairy door that can lead to multiple different fairy realms. And that's what they're looking for because they think that's what's most likely to get them to Wendell's kingdom. And so the third reason that they're going, find Wendell's kingdom, map the Otherlands. There was a scholar who had gone missing looking for the Nexus like 50 or so years ago. They're going to try to find her, or at least track down where she went missing. So they have lots of reasons to go. They don't get to know the villagers as much as they did in the previous book. That's something I really liked about the Encyclopedia of Fairies, was how Emily and Wendell kind of mixed up with the local people and built relationships there. There's not as much of that in this one. A little bit. Doesn't go quite as far. And Emily is determined that Wendell will not have to save her this time. She wants to be the one to do the saving. Something else I will note, because I have a feeling most people watching this review and who are thinking about reading this are probably in the female audience. I love the way that Heather Fawcett decides she's going to tell her story from a gender standpoint. I think a lot of people, when they write a fantasy story in a real world equivalent world, because this is a fantasy world, Cambridge and Norway and Austria, the Alps, those are all real places, but her telling of them is fictional, is that authors feel like they have to be historically accurate in things like gender equality. I have always felt like if it's a fantasy and you get to make up everything about it, why would you make it up to be the same way that our world has been? Why not decide that you want gender equality in your 1900s equivalent fantasy story? It's not overtly feminist. There's nothing annoying about it. Just at Cambridge, there's an equal number of respected men and women who are professors. As they travel, they're just as likely to meet a man or a woman who have jobs that you might expect men to have. There's nothing like, in the early 20th century, Emily would not have been able to travel with a single man or stay in the same house as him or spend the night with him or anything like that without people questioning her morals and being looked down upon for it. And in this book, it's not even a thing. Nobody cares. They're in a relationship and they're in a relationship and no big deal. The thing people worry about is that Wendell is a fairy, not that he's a man. I don't know, it was just very pleasant. Gender inequality and people worrying about her being with her partner, which I won't say because that relationship might be a spoiler if you've only read the first one. It was just all very positively portrayed and I appreciated that. Let me check my notes. I feel like I'm forgetting something. So the rest of my notes will be in the character study, I think, except for one thing. There are some hilarious parts where Emily is very obviously not a cat person. A lot of times that awkward, shy, bookish person is portrayed as a cat person. Emily is not. She's very much a dog person. And in some of the parts of this book, she gets into situations where it's very obvious and some things are kind of hard for her because of that. But I won't say anything else because that could be a spoiler. Overall, if you enjoyed the first book, you will probably enjoy this one. I got the same feelings from it, which were kind of what I wanted from it. At the end, you get the frustrating the story of Emily Wilde and Wendell Bambleby will continue in book 3. So now I'm just waiting for book 3. I hope that review was helpful and I hope to see you back here for more videos. Happy reading! Like all good fairy tales, this book is enchantingly charming with hints of razor-sharp teeth. My only complaint is that it ends. I want to live in Emily's Otherlands forever.